You're lying on a straw mattress, wondering if your toes still exist. They were here a few hours ago, you're pretty sure, but now they're somewhere between frozen and imaginary. The blanket, if you can even call this scratchy, damp wool that, has stopped pretending to help. It's stiff in the corners from last week's spilled broth, and stiff in the middle from, let's just say, you weren't the only one using it last night. The fire went out hours ago. It always does. You tried to keep it going with a bit of damp moss and what looked like half of a chair leg, but wood is a luxury, even rotten wood. And moss? That's just nature's sponge. Basically a joke in winter. Your breath clouds in front of your face. You're inside, yes, but it's somehow colder than outside. That's the thing about medieval homes. The walls are mostly good intentions, with a bit of wattle and daub for structure. No insulation, no glass windows, just holes. Holes the wind seems to know intimately. The door creaks, not because someone's coming in, just because it wants attention. Everything in this house wants attention. Your knees, which haven't stopped aching since Michaelmas. The straw mattress, which crunches like old bread. And the hole in the roof, which keeps you in a complicated relationship with snow. There is no heating. Not really. There's fire, sure, but fire is more of a temporary flirtation than a committed partner. It burns fast, it needs feeding constantly, and it leaves you the moment you get too comfortable. You can't afford to burn logs all night. You're not a lord. You're barely even a peasant with a full roof. Fire is for evenings. Night belongs to the cold, and cold is not shy. It sneaks into your bones, into your teeth, into that weird patch on your lower back that always hurts more when it rains. You curl up tighter, pulling your knees into your chest, like you're trying to become smaller, hoping the heat will stay trapped. But even your own body is stingy with warmth. It's tired. It's underfed. It's running on turnips and prayer. Sometimes you sleep beside your siblings, or your goat, or both. Nobody asks questions. If it has a pulse and doesn't kick too much, it's welcome. Because the thing they don't tell you about medieval nights is this: they're deadly. Quiet, yes. Peaceful? Not really. But deadly, absolutely. Every night. You gamble with the cold. Will you wake up in the morning? Will your grandmother? Will the baby? The frost doesn't knock. It just shows up and takes what it wants. And people don't talk about it much because death is kind of expected. You don't call it a tragedy. You call it winter. You hear rats scurry under the floorboards. At least someone's warm. You imagine them down there, all smug and cozy, nibbling on something you couldn't afford to eat in the first place. You want to be mad, but also good for them. Survival is survival. Sometimes you wonder what rich people do at night. Do they sleep on feathers? Do their fires burn all the way till dawn? Do they ever get cold, really cold? The kind of cold that makes you forget what comfort feels like? Probably not. You've heard stories of kings who sleep in heated chambers with tapestries thicker than your entire wardrobe. Tapestries. You once saw one at a church. It looked like a blanket made by angels. You'd cry from jealousy if your tear ducts weren't frozen shut. Your house has one room, one bed, one chamber pot that everyone's pretending is not almost full. There's no privacy, no heat, and barely enough straw to share. And yet, this is normal. This is life, and there are little tricks. You learn them. You sleep with your socks on, if you're lucky enough to have them. You cover your head with your shawl. Heat escapes from the top, they say. You put hot stones at your feet before bed, assuming you had a fire at all that day. You sleep in twos or threes. You learn to steal warmth with your shins and guard it with your elbows. You learn that movement is the enemy. Shift once, and the cold rushes in like it's been waiting outside the whole time, and you learn to listen to the wind, to the creaks, to the coughs of your siblings, because coughs can turn into something worse, and worse is something no one can afford. Some people don't wake up. It happens. A baby too small, a grandmother too tired, a man who drank too much and forgot to bring the coals in from the hearth. The cold takes them silently. No drama, no scream, just stillness. In the morning, you'll stir the fire back to life with numb fingers. You'll break the thin sheet of ice in the wash basin. You'll stomp your feet and pretend your boots aren't soaking through. And you'll carry on because there is no other choice. There are chores and hunger and another cold night waiting. But here's the thing. You endure. You learn to laugh in the cold, to tell stories under the blankets, to turn frozen bread into something edible with enough goat's milk. You learn to snore in shifts so the rats know someone's always awake. You learn to love the sound of a single ember still glowing in the dark. You stop asking if winter will be easy. You start asking if it will be survivable. And most of the time, it is. Barely, but it is. It wasn't comfort, but it was life. And somehow, it was enough. The rooster hasn't even finished his second squawk, and already your day has begun. Not in a gentle, stretch and yawn kind of way. No, in a someone's already spilled the chamber pot and you stepped in it kind of way. You're tired, you're cold, your back already hurts, and you haven't even made it out the door. But none of that matters, because the first item on today's to-do list is the same as yesterday's, and the day before that. Get water, real water, sort of clean water, water that hopefully doesn't smell like goat feet or look like someone's been washing turnips in it for 2 weeks straight. There's no tap, no kettle quietly bubbling on a stove, no sink with fancy knobs, just a bucket and a very long walk. You sling the empty pail over your shoulder and start the journey. Your boots, if you're lucky enough to own both of them this week, squelch through a mixture of mud, old straw, and the kind of substances you try not to think about. The sun isn't fully up yet. The sky is gray. Your breath fogs in the cold morning air, and every step reminds you, this is not a walk. This is a mission. The well is about a half-mile from the cottage, unless you're in a village with a shared spring. Then it's only a quarter-mile, which still feels like 12 miles when the bucket is full on the way back and sloshing all over your already wet sleeves. You pass neighbors who nod or grunt or glare, depending on how much sleep they got. You pass animals who are probably cleaner than you are. You avoid the ditch where old Marjorie once claimed she saw a demon. It was probably just steam from a puddle, but better safe than exercised. Finally, the well. It's not beautiful. It's not romantic. It's a hole in the ground, surrounded by slippery stones. a creaky pulley system, and the ghost of every splashed sock you've ever mourned. You lower the bucket, it groans. You wince. You say a silent prayer to the wood gods that the rope doesn't snap and send your only bucket plummeting into cold, unreachable darkness. Again, the water comes up slowly. You don't know what's in it. You don't ask. It's brownish, sometimes greenish, but unless it smells like something's died in it, it's fine. Probably. You don't have the luxury of questions. You just need it. For drinking, for cooking, for cleaning. Though cleaning is a strong word when you're using swamp soup to rinse your hands. On the way back, the bucket is heavier, naturally, and every drop that splashes out is one less drop you get to use later. So you walk carefully, or try to. Then you step in something warm and mysterious and suddenly remember that your other boot has a hole. When you finally make it home, your arms feel like overcooked noodles. You place the bucket carefully near the hearth and cover it with a cloth to keep the flies out, as if the flies weren't already living their best lives in every crevice of your home. Now comes the second fun part, figuring out how to use the water. You'll strain it through a rag first. That rag was once white, you're pretty sure. Then you'll boil it, assuming you have firewood, which you probably don't. And if you're lucky, the boil will kill most of what's lurking in there. Most, not all. If your stomach protests later, you'll just call it bad fish and hope it passes by sunrise. You use that water for everything, washing your face, your hands, your one wooden spoon, the baby's cloth, the stew, everything, which means you're constantly doing a strange kind of math. How dirty is too dirty? Can I use this water for potatoes after I washed my feet in it? What if it's just a rinse? Spoiler, the answer is usually yes, because you don't have a choice. Sometimes, when you're really desperate, you collect rainwater. That involves barrels, buckets, bowls, and sometimes just standing there with your mouth open. It feels silly, but it's slightly better than risking water that might come with a bonus case of dysentery. And sometimes you skip washing altogether. You splash a bit on your face. You rinse your hands with yesterday's leftovers. You scrub your teeth with salt and a twig and hope nobody notices the greenish stuff on your molars. Because water isn't just a morning task, it's an all day problem, always running out, always needing more, always heavier than you remember. And yet, this is life. You don't complain much. Who would listen? Everyone's in the same soggy, thirsty boat. You just carry on. You make do. You develop a nose for what smells clean enough. You master the art of using the same water 3 different ways before tossing it out into the dirt where it started. And once in a while, when the sun is out and the well rope behaves and your bucket makes it home without incident, you wash your feet, slowly, gratefully, like it's a sacred act, because it kind of is. It wasn't refreshing, it wasn't clean, but it was enough. And tomorrow, you'll do it all over again. The rooster crows, loudly, rudely, as if it wasn't also sleeping in the same room as you, along with your siblings, your neighbor's kid, 2 chickens, and what you hope was just a rat. You open your eyes, which takes effort, everything's stiff. Your back, your neck, your straw-filled mattress, your moral will to continue. It's still dark, but that doesn't matter. The day has begun. You swing your legs off the bed and immediately yank them back up because your bare foot has just landed in something squishy, something cold, something human. You groan, not again. Because here's the thing, medieval homes didn't come with plumbing, or sinks, or toilets. Not even the fancy chamber pots most people think of when they imagine old-timey inconvenience. Those were for rich folks. For you, the floor, the alley, or a strategically placed wooden bucket. And the bucket? Well, let's just say it's everyone's bucket. Someone clearly forgot to empty it last night. You wrap your foot in the corner of a blanket and begin the delicate shuffle across the room, dodging siblings, straw, mice, and whatever that smell is. You don't ask questions anymore. You don't want answers. The floor is dirt, actual dirt, but somehow it's wetter than dirt should be. Maybe it rained. Maybe the goat had opinions. Maybe someone missed again. Either way, your morning has begun with a grimy treasure hunt just to find a dry spot to stand on. You finally make it to the door. It creaks. You creak. The hinges protest. So do your knees. You step outside. It doesn't get better. The first thing to hit you is the smell. It's a charming mix of smoke, old cabbage, and waste. Not metaphorical waste, actual waste. Because in your village, toilets aren't places. They're everywhere. That narrow alley behind the baker's house? Yep. The patch of grass near the church wall? You bet. The shallow ditch running along the side of the road? Also, yes, you have to look down as you walk. Constantly. Not just to avoid stepping in someone's breakfast from last week, but because people genuinely relieve themselves wherever there's space and privacy, which, let's be honest, is a bush and 2 seconds of eye contact avoidance. You head to the stream, stepping carefully, too carefully. Your back aches, your toes are already numb, and every step is a gamble. You pass someone squatting behind a fence post. They don't look ashamed. You don't look surprised. This is just how things are. People toss their waste into the streets, into open ditches, into the same stream you'll be using to wash your face. And yes, that's the same stream someone else used to wash their sheeps behind yesterday. It's not that people like living like this, but choices are limited when your house is one room and the nearest privy is a plank nailed over a hole that collapsed during the last storm. Besides, digging holes in frozen ground is a skill that requires time, tools, and a level of optimism you no longer possess. Some towns try to organize waste. They'll have gong farmers, yes, actual paid humans, who come around with carts to collect the contents of your humble bucket toilet and haul it out of the city limits. These men are not popular, nor are they paid enough, and they usually only show up after the smell becomes visible. You finally reach the stream. It's shallow, cold, probably contaminated, but it's water. You splash your face, grit your teeth, and pretend the brown stuff floating near your foot isn't what you think it is. Back home, someone's finally awake and making breakfast, porridge, again. But before you eat, you'll need to rinse your hands, if there's any clean water left. and step over whatever's leaking by the hearth. You don't complain. Not really. What would be the point? You've grown up in a world where sanitation means keeping the pig pen from overflowing into the kitchen, and where good hygiene is just not falling into the village waste ditch on the way to church. That happened to Thomas once. He doesn't come around much anymore. Still, you make it work. You adapt. You develop eyes that constantly scan the ground, feet that know where to step, a nose that somehow learns to tune out the worst of it, and a stomach that, well, let's just say, it's developed a strong personality. By midday, the sun is up, the smells are stronger, and someone's dumped a bucket of something right outside your door again. You grab a rag to mop it up. You add it to the pile of things you never expected to become good at, identifying bodily fluids by color and temperature. It's not glamorous. It's not even survivable sometimes. Disease is everywhere. Typhoid, dysentery, worms, things that don't have names yet, but definitely make your stomach do backflips. You've watched neighbors fall ill because they drank from the wrong barrel or walked barefoot through the wrong patch of grass. You've learned to never go out at night barefoot, to avoid the alley behind the tavern, to bring your own cloth when visiting someone's home. You never know where you'll need to sit. This is daily life, a never-ending obstacle course of stink, sludge, and slippery surprises. But somehow, it works. You eat, you clean, loosely defined. You go about your chores. You laugh with your family. You share gossip about the woman who tripped and landed in the community chamber pot. And you manage, day by day, step by careful step, to avoid the worst of it. It wasn't sanitary. It wasn't safe. But it was life. And if you paid attention to where you stepped, sometimes it was just clean enough. You step outside and immediately regret having a nose. The sun is barely up, the sky a sleepy gray, and already the air smells like a dozen things no human should ever have to inhale before breakfast, or after, or ever. It's not just one smell, either. It's layers, like someone tried to make a stew out of cabbage, manure, dead rats, and last year's regrets. Welcome to the street. You take a breath through your mouth. Doesn't help. Now it tastes like medieval street. You try not to think about it, but the scent is everywhere, woven into the mud, the wood, the people, especially the people. Your neighbor passes by in the same tunic he's worn all week, month, lifetime, nods politely, and leaves behind a trail of armpit, ale, and sheep. You nod back and pretend you're not dying inside. The smell isn't new. It's always been there. But every time you leave the house, it hits you like a friendly punch to the face. Let's break it down, shall we? First, there's the human waste, because toilets, as we've established, are for the rich or imaginary. Most people use buckets or pick a corner of the alley when nature calls. Chamber pots get flung out windows with a quick garde l'eau, a phrase that basically means watch out, but might as well mean incoming disaster. And if you don't move fast enough, congratulations, you're a part of the problem now. Then there's the animal situation. Cows, pigs, chickens, they all live where you live, sleep where you sleep, poop where you walk. You get used to stepping over piles of steaming gifts from the local oxen like it's part of a dance routine. But the smell? You don't get used to that. It lingers. It haunts. Next comes the open butchers. There's no refrigeration, no ice, just slabs of meat hanging in the open air, swarmed by flies the size of your thumb and smelling like someone tried to preserve it using sweat and wishful thinking. Blood runs into the streets. Guts lie in piles. The dog community is thriving. Oh, and don't forget the tanners. If hell had a smell, it would come from the tannery. To soften leather, they soak hides in urine, literal human urine, sometimes even in fermented animal brains. Then they scrape off the hair and let it dry in the sun. The result? A scent that can't be described, only survived. You pass the fish stall and briefly consider whether breathing is overrated. The fish were caught yesterday, or the day before, or the day before that. You don't ask. You just try not to inhale. But the combination of rotting scales, brine, and spoiled hope clings to the air like an unwanted kiss. It's not just the big smells, either. It's the daily ones. Boiled onions, damp wool, moldy bread, someone's foot, the inside of your own shirt. You haven't truly lived until you've tried to scrub your only tunic in cold stream water while holding your breath because you're your own worst enemy. Somehow, through it all, people still eat, still laugh, still gossip in the streets. Maybe because everyone smells like this. There's a strange equality in collective stink. No one's judging anyone else for smelling like something died in their boots, because chances are something did. Even the churches smell, not of incense and holiness, but of centuries of damp stone, wax drippings, and tightly packed peasants in winter. If salvation has a scent, it's musty and slightly sour. At some point, you stop flinching, you stop gagging. Your nose, tired of sending up warning signals that get ignored, decides to retire early. You become nose blind. The air still smells like boiling regret and wet dog, but now it's your air, and strangely, you begin to find comfort in it. The smell of fresh bread, barely noticeable in any other century, suddenly cuts through the rot like a miracle. A clean tunic on a feast day feels like royalty. The scent of rosemary in a herb pouch becomes a treasure. You carry dried lavender in your pocket, not because you're fancy, but because it might save your sanity the next time you pass the tanner. Because in this world, smell is survival. It tells you where not to step, what not to eat, who's been sick, who just slaughtered a pig, which alley is probably cursed. And when you've spent your whole life in it, it becomes a part of you. Your hair smells like smoke and grease. Your hands smell like onions and iron. Your boots smell like the street. Because they are the street, you are not separate from the smell. You are the smell. But somehow, you still smile when someone brings a bucket of clean water from the well. You still lean into the scent of warm bread when it passes by, and you still wrinkle your nose and laugh when the pig waddles past, leaving its special trail behind. It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't perfume, but it was home, and somehow that was enough. The rooster crows again, and you groan because you already know what's waiting for you in the cooking pot. Disappointment. You swing your legs off the straw mattress and stretch, your joints cracking like firewood. Your stomach growls, but not the kind that says, I'm ready for pancakes. No, it's the kind that's more like, did we eat yesterday? You're not entirely sure. You shuffle to the hearth, hoping someone, anyone, started the fire. They didn't. Of course they didn't. The ashes are cold, the pot is empty, and the only thing on the table is a crust of bread so hard it could legally be used as a weapon. Welcome to breakfast. The concept of meals? It's romantic if you've never lived through it. You don't sit down to eggs, bacon, and fresh fruit. You don't have cupboards or recipes. You have a pot, a spoon, and a prayer. Most days, it's some form of pottage, a watery stew made from whatever you manage to scavenge, grow, or not already eat. Turnips? Into the pot. Beans? Pot. Last week's cabbage that smells kind of sad. Yep, pot. If you're lucky, there's a bone in there. Not for the meat. There is no meat. The bone's just for flavor. You stir it around like it owes you money, and then suck on it for a little bit of hope. Bread, if you have it, is a precious thing. And by bread, we mean a dense, dark slab made from coarse grain and maybe a few ground up pebbles. You chew it slowly, not for enjoyment, but because your teeth are scared. Dentists don't exist yet, and molars are expensive to lose. Lunch? Adorable. If you're out in the fields, your lunch is what you tucked into your belt before sunrise. A piece of cheese if you're rich, an onion if you're not, and a chunk of stale rye so dry it might qualify as wood. No napkins, no utensils, just dirt-covered hands and whatever dignity you've managed to keep since the pig ate your only good boot. You eat quickly, quietly, eyes always scanning the sky, the road, the weather, because if a storm rolls in, you won't eat anything tomorrow or the day after that, because that's the truth. No one likes to admit. Food is not guaranteed. One bad harvest, you're hungry. Two bad harvests, you're begging. Three, people disappear quietly, softly, sometimes from starvation, sometimes from doing something desperate in the night. You hear stories of villagers boiling grass, of mothers selling their hair for a sack of oats, of fathers trading their boots for a stringy, half-dead chicken that ran away before they even got home. Food becomes currency, confession, and comfort. If you can find it, hunger becomes normal. You don't complain about it. That takes energy. You just exist with it. Your body adjusts. You learn the art of not moving too much, of sipping water slowly to trick your stomach, of chewing longer so your brain thinks you're full. It's not a diet, it's survival. And speaking of water, don't expect it to help much. It's not exactly Evian. It comes from the stream, and the stream comes with surprises, like floating turnip chunks, fish guts, or worse, boiling it helps. If you have firewood, which you don't, because you burned your broom last week just to make tea. Dinner is the same as breakfast, but colder and sadder. You sit around the hearth with your family, passing around a pot that's mostly broth and imagination. You eat with your fingers. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve. You say thank you, even when your meal is mostly hot water and essence of beet. Feast days, those are different. If it's a church holiday and the lord of the manor is feeling charitable, you might get meat, real meat, pork, maybe fish, maybe something that still has eyes and fur. Doesn't matter. You eat it. You weep. You whisper thank you to the pig. But those days are rare. Most days, food is repetition, a ritual of scraping by, a dull gray routine where the question isn't, what's for dinner? It's, is there dinner? And famine? Famine is the quiet villain that lurks just behind the wind. You hear its whisper in the dry soil. You see it in the wilting crops. You feel it when your neighbor's baby won't stop crying because his mother hasn't eaten in 2 days. You smell it when people start baking things they shouldn't. You start rationing. Then you start hiding. Then you start watching. Watching who has food, who's losing weight, who looks suspiciously full. Because when food disappears, so does civility. You stop being hungry and start being sharp, sharp-eyed, sharp-voiced, sharp with decisions. Because this is not just discomfort. This is danger. You've seen people lose themselves to it. You've felt it pulling at you too. But still, you get up each morning. You check the pot. You dig in the dirt. You hope the root cellar wasn't raided. You whisper to the sky that maybe, just maybe, this year will be better because it wasn't enough, but it was food. And somehow, that had to be enough. You wake up with a mouth that tastes like something crawled in and died. Twice, you sit up slowly, smacking your lips, and immediately regret it. There's a fuzzy layer coating your tongue. Your gums feel tender. One of your back teeth is loose. Again, you prod it gently with your finger and wince. Yep, still there, still angry. But brushing? That's not a thing. You grab a crust of stale bread and start chewing. Because in the Middle Ages, that was your toothbrush. Hard bread scrapes the gunk off. Sort of. If you chew long enough and hope hard enough, maybe it'll knock loose the bits of last night's onion stew still hanging out in your molars. There's no toothpaste, no minty freshness, no toothbrush even. At best, you might have a chewed up twig. If you're fancy, it's a tooth stick, a little wooden twig that's been frayed at one end and looks like something a squirrel gave up on. You scrub at your teeth until your gums bleed and call it good. Some people chew on herbs, sage, rosemary, thyme, not for cleanliness, mostly for smell. If you have to speak near someone and you'd prefer they don't pass out, you tuck a sprig of mint into your cheek like a medieval breath mint, but your teeth, still rotting, just more pleasantly scented. And it's not like your diet helps. You eat bread, a lot of it, rough, coarse, stone-ground bread that might still have bits of millstone in it. You don't floss because floss hasn't been invented, and if you tried using string, your teeth might fall out from the effort. There's meat sometimes, but it's tough, salted, and chewy, like jerky with a grudge. Your teeth do their best, but it's a losing battle. And sugar? Oh, sugar is rare, but when it does show up, usually in the richer households, it's like a festival for your cavities. No one knows what tooth decay is, but everyone knows what a toothworm feels like. Spoiler, it's not a worm. It's just pain, shooting, throbbing, wake you up in the middle of the night, kind of pain, but nobody can see inside your mouth. There are no x-rays, no dentists, no little suction tubes or reclining chairs, just a traveling barber who sharpens blades on one side of the cart and pulls teeth on the other. Tooth hurting, yank it out with pliers or something that looks like it came from a blacksmith's toolbox. No numbing, no countdown, just one big pull and a scream that startles the cows. And infection. Oh, infection loves a freshly yanked molar. Sometimes the hole closes up. Sometimes your jaw swells. Sometimes you don't make it, all because a molar went rogue. Your teeth start betraying you early. Black spots, gum disease, teeth that wiggle like they're waving goodbye. And breath? Let's not talk about breath. People didn't get close in those days, unless they had to. Romance smelled like onions and regret. By your 30s, if you're lucky, you've still got some teeth. The front ones mostly. The rest have either been swallowed, pulled, or simply vanished into your porridge one morning, never to be seen again. You adapt. You get quieter when you eat. You avoid biting into anything harder than boiled carrots. You learn to smile with your lips closed. You whisper instead of laugh. And if you're wealthy, maybe you'll get a replacement, a fake tooth, made from bone or wood. Or, if you're feeling fancy and morally flexible, a tooth pulled from the mouth of someone less alive than you. But most people, most people just gum their bread and carry on. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't minty, but it was a mouth, and somehow it was enough. The sun is up, birds are chirping, there's not a cloud in the sky. You step outside, take a deep breath of warm summer air, and immediately start sweating through your fifth layer of wool. Yes, wool, in summer, again, because in medieval life, you don't dress for comfort, you dress for survival, and you survive by wearing layers, many, many layers, mostly wool, always wool, even when the sheep are looking at you like, seriously, you too. Your base layer is a linen shift. If you're lucky, it's your medieval underwear. You sleep in it, work in it, occasionally wash it, very occasionally. Then comes the wool, a tunic, an overdress, an apron, maybe another tunic. If you're heading out to the fields, you might throw on a hood, a belt, a cap, and a second apron, and maybe a cloak. Because why not carry an entire sheep on your shoulders when the sun is trying to boil your brain? Why all the layers? Because you don't have a closet. You have a body, and that body is your storage system. Wool keeps you warm. Wool keeps you dry. Wool keeps you from getting scratched by brambles, or bitten by bugs, or judged for not having enough status. The more layers you wear, the more respectable you look, especially if they're all the same shade of, I used to be gray, but now I'm mystery brown. And don't even think about wearing cotton. That's imported. That's luxury. That's for royalty and people who've never sweat through the same dress 4 days in a row. You? You're wearing what the sheep wore last month, and you'll wear it until it falls apart, or until your cousin borrows it and accidentally never brings it back. You might try to summarize your outfit. Roll up the sleeves, unlace the bodice, hitch your skirt a little higher while working. but you will still be sweating profusely. The linen underneath clings like regret. The wool on top absorbs that regret and turns it into a soggy, itchy sauna that you carry with you all day. And don't forget, no deodorant. You might rub sage or rosemary under your arms, but mostly you just smell like everyone else. A blend of farm work, wood smoke, mild panic, and week old goat. The layers trap everything: heat, odor, crumbs from breakfast. There's a chance you're still carrying yesterday's onion in your sleeve. When it rains, your wool gets heavier, not wetter, heavier, like you've strapped a damp carpet to your chest. You squelch when you walk. You can't lift your arms above your shoulders. And yet, wool is still your best friend because somehow it still insulates. You're miserable, but you're not freezing. That counts for something. Winter isn't any better. It just means more wool, thicker cloaks, lined hoods, mittens that look like they were chewed into shape by a horse. You can barely move, but you're warmish, and that's good enough. You try not to spill stew on your layers, but it's impossible. There are no napkins. Your sleeve is your napkin. It's also your tissue, and your hand towel, and your grocery bag. If you're sneaky enough at the market, washing your layers? Good one. Laundry is a half-day event that involves hauling water, heating it, making soap out of ashes, scrubbing with rocks, and hoping the rain doesn't start halfway through drying. Most people just brush the mud off and call it cleanish. So yes, you wear the same wool, day in, day out, through sun, sweat, frost, and shame. And yet somehow it becomes part of you, familiar, protective, like a second, smellier skin. You adapt, you master the art of relayering without fully undressing. You learn where the breezes hit best. You know which corner of the barn gets the most shade. You become one with the wool. It wasn't cool, it wasn't breathable, but it was what you had, and somehow it was enough. You're tying your shoes, well, your leather wrappings that pretend to be shoes. When you hear the bells again, that slow, dull clang. It's not church, it's not celebration, it's a plague cart. Again, you don't even flinch anymore. That's the part that gets you. The way your body doesn't jump, the way your eyes barely glance up. Just another Tuesday, just another body, or five. You step outside, and the air already smells wrong. Not like manure or smoke or old onions. That's the usual cocktail. No, this one is sweeter, thicker, like decay tried to put on perfume, and it's everywhere. The neighbors are whispering again. You catch snatches of it while pretending to sweep your doorstep. 3 in the next village. The black marks, they said. That family hasn't come out since Thursday. You don't ask. You just keep sweeping the same patch of dirt, like it might protect you. Because the truth is, death is everywhere, and he's not even trying to be subtle about it anymore. It starts with a cough, then a fever, then the swellings. They call them buboes. Sounds almost cute, like a pet name, but they're not cute. They're black, they're bulbous, they burst, and when they do, the smell makes your stomach flip like a bad turnip pie. Sometimes people scream, sometimes they don't have time to. You know what's worse than hearing the bells? Hearing nothing. That eerie, hollow silence when a house goes quiet. when the chickens haven't been fed, and the door hasn't opened, and the candles burned out. You wait, you hope, and then one morning, the cart comes by, and they go in with a cloth over their mouth and come out with a bundle wrapped in a sheet. And that's it. No funeral, no priest, just a prayer muttered under breath and a quick burial far, far away. If you're lucky, you clutch a sprig of dried rosemary in your pocket. People say it wards off the sickness. Some swear by sage. Others hang garlic or rub vinegar on the soles of their feet. You tried all of it, even sniffed dried toad once, still got a fever last spring, made it through. But now, every time you sneeze, your mother looks at you like you might explode. You pass the apothecary's stall and see a jar labeled plague tonic. It's mostly wine and hope. Someone walks past with a waxed handkerchief tied around their nose. It doesn't help, but it makes them feel better. People need something to do with their hands when they're not sure if tomorrow exists. You hear a story, again, from the next village over. A child went to sleep fine and never woke up. A woman found her husband cold in the field. A baker locked himself in his cellar with 6 loaves of rye and hasn't been seen since. You don't even know what's real anymore. The plague brings fear, but it also brings lies. Rumors spread faster than the sickness. Rats did it. No. The air did. No. It's a curse, a punishment, a comet, the Jews, the French, the milkmaid who looks too healthy. The truth? You don't know. No one does. But the fear lives inside your ribs now. You feel it when you wake up too hot, when someone coughs behind you, when your little sister doesn't finish her bread. And yet, you live. You bake the bread. You feed the goats. You scrub the floor with lye until your hands sting. You hang laundry in the sun because someone said fresh air keeps the death away. You try not to touch your face. You fail. You try again because somehow life keeps going, even when the bells toll, even when the streets are quieter, even when you can smell the grave, but before you can see it, people still laugh, quietly. They still sneak a drink at the tavern. They still flirt, still sing, still buy apples, even when the merchant's hands look a little too red. Because what else are you going to do? Cry all day? You've already done that. The plague doesn't knock. It walks in, takes what it wants, leaves the rest trembling. But you wrap your scarf tighter, spit over your left shoulder, just in case, and keep walking. It's not courage, it's just life. And somehow, that's enough to keep going. You wake up with a weird pain in your side. Could be gas, could be a pulled muscle from hauling buckets of questionable water up a hill. Or it could be the beginning of your final chapter. There's no way to know, not in the 1300s, because here's the harsh truth. If something goes wrong in your body, your best bet for survival is blind luck. Maybe the pain goes away. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you walk it off. Or maybe someone's burying you by sundown with a potato in your pocket for the afterlife. There's no hospital, no health insurance, no walk-in clinic, just old Marjorie with her bundle of dried weeds, and a doctor who believes that bloodletting solves everything from coughs to childbirth. You sniffle once, and your cousin moves 2 feet away from you. not out of rudeness, out of experience. Last time someone sneezed at the dinner table, half the village disappeared within the week. So, yes, getting sick is terrifying, not inconvenient, not unpleasant, lethal. Got a fever? You're told to rest, drink something warm, and maybe have your veins opened with a rusty blade to balance the humors. Of course, feeling down? That's probably an excess of black bile. Sore throat? Try gargling vinegar and chicken fat. And let's not forget the leeches. So many leeches, because nothing says medical genius like strapping blood sucking worms to someone's forehead and calling it healing. But maybe your problem isn't illness. Maybe it's people, because medieval towns are crowded, loud, and full of folks carrying blades, swords, daggers, angry farm tools. You bump into someone at the market the wrong way. That could end in a stabbing, bar fight, stabbing, argument over who took your goat, probably stabbing. And sure, there are laws, technically, but the local constable is usually asleep or drunk or busy avoiding actual work. So, unless you're rich or noble, you're not. Justice tends to be more personal. Your skin is your only armor. You wear wool, not Kevlar. One cut gets infected, one scratch festers, and boom, dead. Even a bad tooth could kill you. Even a splinter could turn into a swollen mess. And if it doesn't drain on its own, that's just how you go now. Want a broken bone reset? You'd better know someone with strong hands and no mercy. Want a wound cleaned? Hope for a bit of clean water and an herb woman who actually knows her nettles from her nightshade. Spoiler, many don't. And if childbirth is in your future, may the saints be with you. Giving birth is like playing dice with death while blindfolded. Half the time, the mother doesn't make it. Half the time, the baby doesn't. Occasionally, both survive, but never with all their teeth. So, what is your best bet for survival? Don't get sick. Don't get stabbed. Don't drink from the ditch. Don't trust the traveling surgeon. Don't fight anyone bigger than you. Don't have a weak immune system. And above all, don't hope for help, because medicine is less science and more superstition with better branding. You'll be treated with smoke, prayers, onions, burnt feathers, goat spit, and maybe, just maybe, a well aimed slap. Still, you carry on. You chew on garlic like it's a holy relic. You rub mustard seeds on your chest because someone's cousin swore it cured pneumonia. You avoid the sneezy guy from the next village. You dodge sharp objects. You whisper blessings over your soup. It's not exactly a plan, but it's all you've got, and somehow, it's just barely enough to keep you alive. You wake up itchy. Again, your hair is matted. Your skin smells like smoke, sweat, and sleep, and there's a mysterious crumb in your ear. You stretch, yawn, and scratch the back of your neck like a feral cat. It doesn't help. Nothing helps, because here's the unwashed truth. You're not taking a bath today, not tomorrow, probably not this month, maybe not even this season, because bathing, actual, full body, get in the water bathing, just isn't something medieval folks do regularly. Not because they're lazy, not because they enjoy being crusty, but because taking a bath is a massive, expensive, borderline dangerous event. First, You need water, not a tap, not a warm shower, water from a stream or well, carried one bucket at a time uphill by your own aching arms. Then it has to be heated, slowly, over a smoky fire that takes half your day and all of your patience. That's if you have firewood, which you don't, because you burned your stool last week just to boil oats. And what do you bathe in? A wooden tub that leaks if you breathe near it too hard. If your family's lucky, you share it, one after the other, from oldest to youngest. By the time it's your turn, the water is a lukewarm soup of sweat, foot dirt, and someone else's elbow. Scum. Even when you do bathe, it's never as thorough as you'd like. You scrub with sand or a scratchy cloth. Soap is rare. When it exists, it smells like lard and regret. And if you're in a town with a public bathhouse, well, good luck. You're sharing that space with half the town, a few questionable stains, and someone coughing hard enough to lose a lung. Plus, people are afraid of water. They believe it opens your pores to disease. That bathing can actually make you sick. And honestly, based on the quality of the water, fair point. So you wash the parts people can see, your face, your hands, maybe your neck if you're feeling fancy. Everything else gets managed. You change your shirt once a week, if you have a second one. You air out your undergarments over the fire and call it laundry. You scrape mud off your boots and pretend that counts as cleaning up. Hair? Tangled, greasy, alive, possibly. You comb it with fingers or bone. You tie it back. You tuck it under a hat and hope nobody notices. Lice are a given. You don't fight them anymore. You name them. You develop relationships. That one's Larry. He's been with me since Lent. Your teeth are another story. You chew mint leaves or sage when you remember. You scrape your teeth with a stick if you're feeling responsible. But mostly, you just accept that you will smell like fermented onion stew for the foreseeable future. And yet, this is normal. Everyone stinks. Everyone itches. Everyone has a little bit of sweat from someone else on them. No one's judging you for having dirt under your nails or hay in your hair. It's part of the aesthetic. You've seen nobles with perfume and silk collars still scratching at fleas under the table. Even romance adjusts. You don't fall in love with a scent. You fall in love with someone whose breath doesn't immediately kill small animals. You flirt with a wink, not a whiff, and you learn to find beauty in someone who's only moderately sticky by dinner time. Still, every once in a while, the stars align. You have water, you have time, you have a borrowed tub, and you bathe. Truly bathe. Scrub until your skin feels foreign. Dunk your head. Sigh like a bishop with warm wine. And for one brief, shining moment, you are clean. It lasts about an hour. Then you put your wool clothes back on. Step into the mud. Scratch your leg. And get on with your life. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't fragrant. But it was medieval hygiene. And somehow, it was just barely enough. The rooster's screaming again. You're not sure if it's announcing morning or just mad about its own existence. Either way, you're up. You swing your legs off the straw mattress, immediately regret it. Your knees creak. Your back is already sore, and the cold floor feels like punishment for sins you don't remember committing. You haven't had breakfast. You won't for a while, because first, you work. A full day's work in the Middle Ages doesn't mean a tidy shift with a lunch break and a water cooler. It means surviving your to-do list without losing a finger or sinking knee-deep into a bog, which is harder than it sounds. Today could be anything, but let's go with the greatest hits. 1. Chopping wood, aka How to Ruin Your Spine by Age. 22. You start with the axe. Heavy, splintered handle, blade that's probably duller than your cousin Roger. The woodpile is low. Of course it is. You burned most of it last week during that tiny snowstorm. That was actually 6 days of frozen despair. You haul the logs over. Some are damp, some are frozen, some look like they're actively fighting you. You swing, you miss, you swing again. Your hands blister. You keep going, because no wood means no fire, and no fire means your entire family freezes to death by sundown. So, yes, high stakes. Also, if you're wondering, no gloves. Your fingers go numb. Your arms burn. You wipe sweat from your forehead with the same sleeve you used to clean the goat's stall yesterday. Congratulations. You're now damp and itchy too. Grinding grain, aka you, a rock, and 6 hours of dusty regret. Maybe it's a light work day, which means grinding grain. You sit down next to the quernstone, an innocent-looking circle of doom. There's a top stone, a bottom stone, and a tiny hole where you pour in the grain. You start turning. It's just you and a crank, round and round and round, until your shoulders beg for mercy and your hands are covered in flour, sweat, and possibly a little blood. You sneeze approximately 47 times. Your nose itches, but your hands are dusty, so now your face is dusty too. The flour ends up in your eyelashes, your hair, your mouth. You cough and keep turning. By the time you're done, you've made enough flour for half a loaf of bread for 7 people, and you get to do it again tomorrow. Getting stuck in a muddy field, the classic. But maybe today is even more exciting. Maybe it's fieldwork day. That means trudging out to the fields just after dawn, a spade in one hand and a prayer in the other. It's rained. Of course it has. The field is not soil anymore. It's soup. You take a step, squelch, another, squelch, then splat. Your foot disappears. You yank it out, but the boot stays behind. Now your sock is soaked, which wouldn't be as tragic if you had another pair. You don't. You dig. You haul. You sow seeds, or pull weeds, or drag a wooden plow through sludge, while the cow you're working with looks personally offended that it's awake. Your back screams, your thighs shake, a bug flies into your eye. You try to pretend it's all fine, that this is what life is, which, unfortunately, it is. Then it rains again. Your tunic clings to your legs. Your underclothes are soaked. Your hair feels like someone poured soup in it. You sneeze, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and keep going, because there is no calling in sick, no day off. You stop working when your body gives out, or your tool breaks, or the sun goes down, and you literally can't see anymore. Bonus, task, animal chores. You thought you were done. Adorable. Now feed the pigs. Chase the chickens, milk the goat who hates you, scrape out the stable with a broken rake and hope nothing bites you. Then collect eggs from a hen who is definitely plotting your death. And let's not forget fetching water, repairing fences, scouring pots, spinning thread, fixing that leak in the roof with mud and prayer, and swatting flies who clearly think they own the place. By the time the sun sets, you're so tired you can barely sit upright. Your hands are blistered. Your clothes are soaked. You smell like wet wool, onion, and effort. Dinner is turnip soup. Again, you fall into bed still wearing half your mud. Someone's snoring. The fire's dying. Your feet hurt. Your hands twitch in your sleep from all the repetitive motion. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean, but it was work. And somehow, it was just barely enough. You wake up with a pounding headache and something oozing from your elbow. That can't be good. But there's no calling a doctor because there's no doctor's office, no clinic, no cheerful nurse with a clipboard asking how you rate the pain from 1 to 10, no waiting room with tattered scrolls and a bowl of fruit you're too nervous to touch. In fact, you'd be lucky to even see a doctor in your entire life because medieval healthcare works a little differently. First of all, you're poor, which means if you want medical attention, you've got three choices: a neighbor who knows plants, a wandering barber who sharpens knives and occasionally sharpens people. Prayer, lots of prayer. That's your system. If your fever spikes, your mother sends someone to find Marjorie the herb woman, who smells like wet hay and speaks mostly in curses. She shows up with a sack of suspicious leaves, rubs goose fat on your forehead, and ties something damp around your ankle to draw out the evil. You're not sure what the evil is, but it feels like it's winning. Got a cut? Someone pours vinegar on it and wraps it in linen that used to be a curtain. Maybe you survive. Maybe the wound turns green and smells like despair. Either way, there is no antiseptic, no antibiotics, just hope and onions. A lot of onions. If things get really serious, like a broken bone or a visible rash, you might consider calling in the surgeon. But here's the catch: surgeons don't have degrees. They have tools, big, terrifying tools, usually rusty, almost always stained. Their idea of medicine is cutting things off before they spread. You broke your leg, they might splint it, or they might amputate. It depends on their mood and the weather. Don't even think about anesthesia. You'll bite down on a stick and scream into a pillow while someone saws through your limb. Later, if you're lucky, someone hands you a wine-soaked rag and says, "That'll help with the sting. Got a toothache. You'll be seeing the barber." Yes, the same guy who gave your uncle a haircut last week. He keeps a bucket of teeth in the back, right next to his shaving soap. He'll yank yours out with metal tongs, while two villagers hold you down and the goat watches judgmentally. As for mental health, laughs in Latin feeling off is either a demon, an imbalance of humors, or your uterus misbehaving again. Treatment includes fasting, cold baths, bloodletting, or being locked in a room until you calm down. You don't calm down. No one calms down. Also, no privacy. Your rash is now public knowledge. Your digestive problems? Local gossip. The entire village knows you fainted in the field last week and assumes it's either the plague or a punishment from God. Either way, they're avoiding you. If you're very rich, maybe a university trained doctor will visit. He'll wear a long robe, quote Aristotle, and spend 20 minutes inspecting your tongue before diagnosing you with a hot liver. He'll prescribe leeches and tell you to avoid pears, then send you a bill written in Latin. And if you're not rich, you just lie in bed, sweating, hallucinating, and waiting to either get better or die. Often, it's both, just not in that order. Your medicine cabinet is a box of herbs, a rusty knife, a holy relic someone swears cured their cousins, gout, and a chicken feather. None of it works, but it's what you have. So, yes, you're on your own. No insurance, no prescriptions, just whatever you can boil, crush, or cry over. And somehow you make it. One fever, one splinter, one suspicious cough at a time. It wasn't modern, it wasn't sterile, but it was survival. And for most, that was just barely enough. You wake up starving, not in the I skipped dinner once kind of way, more like the I'd eat a boiled shoe if someone seasoned it right, sort of desperate. Your stomach growls like it's planning a rebellion, but you already know what's on the menu today: bread and maybe disappointment. You drag yourself to the hearth where someone's poking yesterday's fire back to life with a stick that used to be a fork. A crust of bread sits on the table. It's hard, really hard. You could use it to break a window or a tooth. Either way, it's breakfast. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, but because if you don't, you might chip a molar. The bread is made from coarse grain, milled between stones that sometimes shed pebbles into the mix. Yes, your bread might literally contain rocks. Surprise, there's no butter, no jam, no fruit. Fresh fruit is a luxury. You don't snack on grapes. You don't eat apples in bed. If it grows nearby, it's probably reserved for the Lord's table, or it's already been pecked at by birds, stolen by rats, or turned mushy under a child's foot. If you're lucky, and that's a big if, you might have a bit of meat. It's not fresh, it's not tender, it's something vaguely animal, salted beyond recognition and hanging from a beam near the ceiling. You cut off a hunk, it crumbles, it smells like despair. Vegetables? Sure, if you count turnips, leeks, and maybe a cabbage that's seen better centuries. You throw it into a pot and call it stew. It's mostly water, but it's hot, and that counts for something. Lunch is a repeat of breakfast, but colder. Bread again, maybe with a smear of dripping if you're lucky. Beef fat, saved from 3 dinners ago, and stored in a cracked clay bowl covered in cloth. If you're really lucky, it doesn't have mold on it. If it does, you just scrape that part off. Close enough. Still hungry? Try ale. Everyone drinks ale, even the kids. Not because you're wild, but because the water might kill you faster than your diet. It's weak, warm, and tastes vaguely like old wheat and bad decisions. But at least it's wet. You think about fruit sometimes, not like the kind you see in paintings, plump, juicy, glistening in bowls. No, you think about one pear, Just one, a ripe one, not half eaten by a worm. You saw one once, at the market. Then the merchant picked it up and shouted, 12 pence, and you laughed so hard you almost cried. 12 pence is what you make in 2 weeks. So you go back to your bread. Dinner is bread again, with maybe some pottage, a chunky, grayish stew that contains water, root vegetables, and something that might have once been meat. You call it dinner. You don't ask questions. You've heard nobles eat differently, with sauces, with spices, with plates that don't smell like last week's porridge. They have knives, sharp ones, and servants. They eat roast duck and drink wine. They peel oranges with tiny silver tools. You watch them during feast days, swallowing your envy with your bread crust. But you eat what the earth gives, which is often not much. There are no fridges, no canned goods, no cupboards full of options. Food is seasonal, limited, and often almost spoiled. You smell everything before you eat it. You learn to cut off the bad bits. You pray the rest won't kill you, and you learn to accept hunger. It's normal. It's daily. You sleep with it, work with it, carry it like a second stomach that never quite fills. Still, you eat because bread is better than nothing, because stew is better than water, because surviving is more important than flavor. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't tasty, but it was food, and somehow it was just barely enough. You roll over and immediately make eye contact with your cousin. It's dark. You're half awake. Your knee is pressed against someone else's back. A goat just sneezed near your feet, and you're pretty sure that wasn't your blanket. Because in medieval life, privacy is a rumor, not a right. You live in one room, maybe two, if your family's fancy, or your dad is the village miller. But even then, rooms aren't separated by doors. They're separated by hope. Your entire life happens in one shared space, eating, sleeping, arguing, giving birth, dying, and everything in between. And when night falls, there's only one place to go, the bed, singular, not plural. Beds, in the loosest possible sense, are large-ish frames stuffed with straw or feathers, if you're a baron, which you're not, and covered with wool blankets that haven't been washed since Michaelmas. It smells like onions, feet, and long-term cohabitation. You share it with your siblings, your parents, sometimes visiting relatives. If you're lucky, the family pig gets its own corner. If you're unlucky, the family pig snores. There's no my side of the bed. There's just this inch of mattress I'm clinging to with my left butt cheek. If someone turns over, the whole bed shifts. If someone sneezes, everyone feels the breeze. Elbows are weapons. Knees are landmines. And there's always one person who sleeps diagonally, like they paid extra. Changing clothes? Forget it. Everyone sees everything all the time. You change behind a blanket, not in another room, behind a blanket. If you're lucky, someone holds it up. If you're not, the chickens get a show. Need to go to the bathroom at night? You shuffle to the chamber pot in the corner, praying you don't trip over someone's face. And yes, everyone can hear you. No flush, no fan, just noise, and maybe polite coughing. Need some emotional space. That's adorable. Privacy isn't just physical, it's mental. And in medieval life, you get neither. Everyone knows your business because everyone hears your business. You cry, they hear. You fight, they hear. You whisper your secret crush's name into the straw mattress, they hear, and they tell. Even rich people don't get full privacy. Sure, they have rooms, but servants walk in and out constantly. Nobles host guests in their bedrooms. Sometimes they conduct political meetings while someone is literally shaving their legs. Dignity, optional. At the inn, same deal. You share a bed with strangers. You rent half a bed like you're splitting a pizza. Sometimes you don't even face the same direction. Just flip head to feet and pretend that makes it less awkward. It doesn't. Your seatmate might be a traveling merchant, or a thief, or someone who talks in their sleep and steals the covers. You sleep in shifts during travel. You nap beside horses. You share tents. You sleep in piles for warmth. Your body is not your own. It's part of a group project. Want time to think? You'd better take a long walk, or climb a tree, or pretend to check the roof for leaks, because even your thoughts feel like they echo. Still, people adapt. You learn to whisper, to pretend you're asleep, to ignore the snoring, the shifting, the bodily functions. You learn to change shirts with one arm under your tunic and develop Olympic level blanket negotiation skills. You joke about it. You bond over it. You whisper stories and secrets under covers, all crammed together like cold spoons. It wasn't private. It wasn't peaceful, but it was life. And somehow, it was just barely enough. You're 13, wearing your father's hand-me-down tunic, and still figuring out how not to trip over your own feet. But some guy on a horse just galloped through the village, yelling about honor, glory, and the king's banner. And now, somehow, you've decided you want to be a knight. Bad idea. Because behind the shining armor and gallant songs is a simple truth. Being a knight was less about glory and more about dirt, debt, blood, and probably dying in a ditch. But you don't know that yet. Not while you're daydreaming with a stick as a sword and a pot lid as a shield. First, you have to train, which means being a page, aka a glorified servant. You get to clean boots, polish armor that isn't yours, fetch meat for people who barely remember your name, and sleep in a hallway, if you're lucky. If you're not, it's the stables. At 14, you graduate to squire. Still not a knight, just a better trained servant with slightly more danger. You help your knight put on his armor, sharpen his sword, tend to his festering wounds, and hold his horse when things get rough. He might thank you. He might yell at you. He might bleed on you. And then, maybe, if you survive long enough, you're knighted. There's a ceremony, a sword on the shoulder, maybe a feast. You feel important for exactly 7 minutes. Then you get your first real job. War. You arrive at a battlefield, expecting trumpets and banners and noble speeches. What you get is mud, screaming, the smell of blood, and a guy with half a nose trying to stab you with a stick. Armor is heavy. So heavy. Chainmail pulls on your shoulders like guilt. Plate armor turns you into a walking oven. You sweat buckets. You can't hear anything inside your helmet. And if you fall over, good luck getting back up without help. You're a turtle with a sword. Horses, expensive, glorious, terrified of loud noises. They bolt, they trip, they bleed. You fall off. A lot. And the weapons? They're not clean. They're not shiny. They're covered in rust and the remains of the last poor soul who thought a thin helmet would stop an axe. You watch your friends die, messily, slowly. You see people trampled, torn open, screaming for their mothers. No one sings about that part. And when you survive, you get nothing. Maybe a crust of bread, maybe a coin, probably more work, because knights don't just fight. They collect taxes. They enforce rules. They get sent to guard cold castles in the middle of nowhere, where the food is bad and the ale is worse. And if you're not noble born, you're likely renting your armor, your horse, and your dignity. Glory? Sure. But you'll be paying off your saddle until you die. Also, wounds get infected. Always. There's no real medicine. Just cloth, vinegar, and someone praying over your gaping leg hole. You lose fingers. You lose ears. You gain scars. Your sword arm aches every morning for the rest of your life. You miss weddings, births, feast days. You get called to fight some other lord's battle over land you'll never own and people you'll never meet. And when you finally come home, what are you? A hero? Maybe. A limping man with stories no one wants to hear? Definitely. You still wear your armor sometimes. For status. Kids look at you like you're magic. You want to tell them the truth. This isn't glory. It's grit. It's survival. It's bleeding into your boots and pretending not to cry. But you don't. You let them dream because someone has to carry the sword after you. It wasn't noble. It wasn't clean. But it was knighthood. And, somehow, it was just barely enough. You're lying in bed. If you can call it a bed, it's really just a sack of straw stuffed into a wooden frame that creaks every time you breathe. The fire's out. The wind howls through the cracks in the wall. Your blanket smells like old stew and damp wool. You're finally drifting off to sleep when you hear it. Scratch, scratch, skitter. You freeze. You know that sound. Everyone knows that sound. Rats. At first, you try to ignore it. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the goat. Maybe it's your imagination. Scratch. Skitter, skitter. Chew. Nope. Definitely a rat. Probably 2. Possibly 12. You sit up and squint into the darkness. You see nothing, but you feel them. Like tiny, furry goblins watching you from the corners. They live here too. This is their home. You're just the roommate who pays rent in leftover bread crusts and body heat. You hear something knock over a spoon, then the softest squeak, then a thud, and that's when you accept it. You are not alone. Not now. Not ever. Because rats are a fact of medieval life. A noisy, dirty, chewed through your shoe kind of fact. They live in the walls, in the straw, under the floorboards, inside your dreams. They eat your grain, your soap, your candle wax, your fingers. If you fall asleep with food on them, you've seen a rat carry off half an onion like it was on a mission from God. You tried to scare them away once, banging pots, setting traps. The traps caught one. The rest laughed and invited more friends. Your cat stopped trying After the third ambush, he just watches now, full of shame and apathy. You tuck your feet tightly under your blanket, hoping the rats are full tonight. They're bold. They'll run across your chest. One ran across your cousin's face last week. He hasn't smiled since. And the smell? Let's just say you know when a rat dies inside the wall, and you wait, patiently, for the smell to stop, for the sounds to fade, until a new one moves in, and the cycle begins again. You learn to live with them. You chew your bread faster, so they don't get any. You tie your food up in sacks and hang them from beams like edible chandeliers. You whisper threats into the floorboards before bed. They do not care. Sometimes you even talk to them, because at least they're awake. You name one Gerald. He lives behind the firewood and steals your scraps. He's kind of part of the family now. You once found a rat in your shoe, a live one, just curled up, cozy. It blinked at you like you were the intruder. And during the plague? Oh, they thrived. While you were terrified, rats were having the time of their lives, running through the streets, nesting in empty homes, spreading disease like it was their job. It kind of was. But still, they're here, in the rafters, under your bed, next to the bread box. They chew, they squeak, they scamper, they poop, and somehow you sleep anyway. It wasn't clean, it wasn't peaceful, but it was home, and somehow it was just barely enough. You're standing in a candle-lit hall, music playing, bread baking, ale sloshing, and everyone around you is dancing like they don't have a care in the world. But you do, because halfway through the third verse of that overly cheerful lute tune, you notice something across the room. Someone coughing, hard, then again and again, and you feel the entire air change. That's not just a cough. That's the beginning of the end. Because welcome to your medieval social life, where gathering in large numbers is just asking the bubonic plague to RSVP. You came to the village feast, hoping for a break from the dirt and fear. Maybe a flirt, maybe a dance, maybe something resembling fun. But instead, you're trying to figure out if that red spot on the baker's neck is a wine stain or a death omen. Because let's face it, a party could kill you. The plague doesn't care if it's a wedding or a market day or your cousin's third christening. If people are breathing near each other, someone's leaving with more than just a hangover. You've heard the stories. Parties where everyone danced, drank, laughed, then woke up with a fever, lumps, black spots, and by the end of the week, the whole town was burying bodies by torchlight. So now, every time you go out, there's this weird tension. People smile, but it's tight, forced. They hug, but only kind of. You avoid the guy who's been sneezing. You avoid the woman with the shiny forehead. You avoid the toddler who looks moist. There's no such thing as it's just a cold. Everything could be the plague. You used to play games, sing songs, pass around the same mug of ale. Not anymore. Now you sip from your own, eyes always watching, nose always twitching. Is that garlic or gangrene? Even romance is terrifying. You meet someone under the apple tree. He's charming, smiling, has all his teeth. A bonus. But then he rubs his neck. You freeze. You ask jokingly, "That's not a bubo, is it?" He laughs. You laugh. But you're already taking a step back, just in case. You can't even mourn properly. If someone dies, the funerals are rushed. Prayers are whispered through cloth. No one lingers. You drop the body in the pit, say a word, and move on. Too long in one spot, and you're next. So yes, parties still happen. Sort of. People crave joy, music, togetherness. But now it comes with disclaimers. Don't touch the bread unless your hands are clean. Don't dance with anyone who's coughing. No kissing strangers, even if they're cute and not actively dying. The musicians show up with scarves over their mouths. The ale tastes like anxiety, and someone is always watching the side door for the village priest, because if he shows up early, it's not for wine. And yet, people still go, because what else is there? You spend all day in the fields, in the mud, with your blistered hands and your rat roommates. So when there's music, you go. When there's a chance to dance, you do. Even if it might be your last one, you laugh a little louder. You eat the bread while it's hot. You sing the chorus, even though your throat burns. Because for 1 hour, one night, one fleeting moment, you get to feel alive. It wasn't safe. It wasn't smart. But it was human. And somehow, it was just barely enough. You hear shouting in the village square. You're not surprised. Someone's stolen something. Again. A loaf of bread, maybe. A chicken, or just someone's pride. The whole town gathers like they always do, not for justice, but for the spectacle. Because in medieval life, law is more bark than paperwork, and your local justice system consists of one sleep-deprived constable, two unpaid volunteers, and a whole lot of personal grudges. The man being dragged by the collar is muddy, bloody, and definitely guilty of something. Or not. It honestly doesn't matter. Proof is optional. There's no court date, no trial by jury, no stern man in a wig reading rights you don't have. The law is mostly just loud, emotional, improvised. If enough people say you did it, congratulations. You did it. And if you didn't, well, tough century. The village elder squints at the accused, like he's trying to remember where he left his goat. Someone suggests putting him in the stocks. Someone else votes for tying him to a tree. One guy yells, "Hang him!" just a little too excitedly. Justice here is quick, messy, public. Sometimes, if you're lucky or noble, you get fined. A pig, a chicken, a sack of grain. Currency is flexible, as long as someone gets something. But if you're poor, loud, or not from around here, the rope comes out, or the ducking stool, or the cartwheel justice wheel of whatever happens, happens. They used to do trial by water, toss you into a freezing pond. If you float, you're guilty and probably a witch. If you sink, congratulations, you're innocent and also drowning. Once, they had a guy walk across hot coals to prove his honor. He tripped. They said that was a sign from God. Took his land and his boots for the serious stuff. Murder, treason, saying something snarky about the king's haircut. They cart you off to a lord's manor. Maybe you'll see a judge. Maybe you'll see the inside of a dungeon so dark, even the rats have anxiety. But mostly, justice is handled by the crowd. Someone stole your cow, gather your neighbors, chase them down, and tie them to a tree until they confess. Someone insulted your mother? Duel them in the alley. Someone owes you 3 chickens. Good luck ever seeing those chickens again. They've probably joined a gang of feral poultry by now. And women? Let's just say the justice system isn't your friend. You're too loud, suspicious. Too quiet, suspicious. You heal people with herbs, definitely a witch. You blink too many times at church. Better start preparing a firewood stack. There are no lawyers, no appeals, just the village, the wind, and a guy with rope who used to be a baker but now leads executions because someone had to do it. And still, people survive. They learn to stay quiet, keep their heads down, avoid trouble, smile at the wrong people just enough, but not too much. Whisper justice, never shout it, because the law doesn't protect you. It reminds you that at any moment, in any place, a rope and a tree might be all the justice you get. It wasn't fair, it wasn't safe, but it was order, and somehow it was just barely enough. You're 32. Your back hurts. Your teeth are gone. You've had a cough since Easter. And no one will say it out loud, but you know, you're old now. In medieval life, you're not middle-aged. You're basically on the victory lap. The average life expectancy is somewhere in the don't make long-term plans range. If you make it to 35, people start treating you like a rare forest creature. Children stare. The priest nods slowly when you walk by. Even your goat respects you more. But you weren't supposed to live this long, not with everything trying to kill you. Let's start with childhood, where survival is less adorable toddler years and more dodge dysentery. Half your siblings didn't make it past their 5th birthday. The other half coughed so hard for so long, they just kind of stopped. You got through it, barely, mostly by eating dirt, crying under hay bales, and developing a suspicious immunity to spoiled broth. Then came adolescence, which was just like adulthood, except you were shorter, and people expected you to carry heavier things. By 12, you were working. By 15, married. By 17, probably a parent. By 25, absolutely exhausted. Now it's your 30s, and your body is done. You have mystery pains. Your knees sound like someone snapping twigs. You get winded walking to the well. That boil on your leg hasn't gone away, and your neighbor died from something that started the same way. You're one stubbed toe away from the pearly gates. And the worst part? No one expects more from you. Medicine? A hot compress and a prayer. Maybe some herbs from the midwife's garden, half of which are also used to flavor soup. If you visit a doctor, he'll either bleed you with a knife or suggest leeches with the confidence of a man who's never had either work. If you get an infection, that's it. If you fall off a ladder, good night. If you eat something weird, welcome to 2 days of stomach terror and a hasty burial in a shallow grave with no name marker. You have no retirement plan, no pension, no legacy except a handful of tools, a cracked mug, and a child who hopefully doesn't steal all your turnips after you're gone. But maybe you're one of the lucky ones. Maybe you'll pass quietly in your sleep, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like smoke and cabbage. Or maybe it's more dramatic. A fever, a fall, a cough that turns into silence. You don't get last words. You don't get peace. You just get tired. And then, gone. People don't mourn loudly. They can't. Life keeps going. The harvest doesn't wait. The pigs still need feeding. The baby is crying. Again. They bury you behind the church. If they can. If there's space. If you weren't contagious. And that's it. No monument. No portrait. Just a whisper. A memory. A quiet sigh over a bowl of stew. He lived long. He made it to 35. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was life. And somehow, it was just barely enough.